And that is the main issue with our world today, is people aren't seeking God. They're seeking the things that they already believe to be true. And so they end up in a mindset that is so contrary to God that they can't even possibly see God anymore. In an evolutionary mindset, this is just so simple to talk about, right? It's so easy, because this is a main point of contention to Christianity today, is evolution. And so many people become atheists because they believe that there's enough factual evidence in evolution, in the things that they've found in the world today, that they can disprove God. And they only believe that people believed in God in human history because they couldn't explain the things that they observed in the world. But it's actually funny, because it's the opposite of that that's true. Even though scientists and physicists today see a lot and observe a lot of things happening, because they are shut off to the possibility of God, they can't make sense of it. Yeah, there's amazing things that science has done for us, amazing observations that it's made, but in no way, shape, or form has come close to explaining the universe. How it got here, why we're here, and why we're so different than everything else that's here. You know that brain that we were talking about? It's like the most incredible thing in all of creation, because it gives you the opportunity to choose. It gives you the opportunity to reason. It gives you consciousness. And that is something that an evolutionary mindset could never explain. And that's what trips me out about it, is they say, oh, it's all about facts. I just observe the facts, and that's why I don't believe there's a God. Well, then how do you explain a brain? How do you explain consciousness? You can't explain consciousness. Think about it. In the hospitals today, they can keep someone on life support for days and days. They could put them in a coma, and they could be in a coma for years, and yet they're not there. So yeah, okay, great. You can keep someone alive. But if their spirit isn't there, then what does it matter? How do you explain consciousness? Science can't explain consciousness. Only God can explain consciousness. In the procreation of human beings, it's the same way. Like, of course, yeah, like seed and egg come together. Like when a mommy and a daddy love each other, right? Like, okay, but I'm talking further than that. Like, okay, you have this fertilized egg, but then what makes it grow? What gives it growth? And beyond that, okay, let's say you can make it grow. But then what gives it that consciousness? What puts the spirit inside of it that it actually comes alive? That's something only God can explain. There's no other observation that explains consciousness. And so even the leading scientists and physicists in our world today can't explain it, and so they find a way around it instead of addressing the issue. Why do they do that? Because they refuse to admit that there has to be a higher power that created all of this. So they're finding any other way around it. But in finding every other way around it, they're missing things that they actually could explain. Think about it. Think about the sun, the moon, and the stars. Think about the whole universe and the way that it works. You know the theory of relativity that Einstein came up with? It's basically gravity, but in the universe, essentially, and how everything works together. Isn't it amazing that you see millions, from what we can see, millions of stars and planets and everything out there, and yet it's all floating through space, somehow all in uniformity without crashing into one another and creating huge explosions all over the sky. Isn't that remarkable? That's a miracle. Do you know that God says that he holds all things together with the word of his power? So the things that science can't explain, God simply explains it to us in his word. This is what he says. 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 This is what he Here it is in Hebrews 1, verse 3. He says, simply, he's talking about Jesus, and he simply says, and upholding all things by the word of his power. That means he holds all things together. You know, there's a cell within all of us called a laminin. And it is the cell in every living thing that literally holds everything together. Without it, it's the glue, right? Without it, everything would come apart. You know what that cell looks like? It literally looks like a cross. Look that up. Google that. Look it up, laminin. The cell literally looks like a cross inside. And so you see this literally, where Jesus is holding everything together by the word of his power. He's literally holding it together. These things are things anybody can see. These days, anybody could go on Google and says, what causes a human being to be held together? It's the laminin. Jesus is showing us, hey, look, I'm the one holding this whole world together. I'm the one who puts the stars in the sky. I'm the one who makes clouds and causes it to rain and thunder and lightning and all those things. All these things that they say are just natural processes. Things that the universe does naturally. And so accidentally. Because that's what they try to tell us, right? All this just came from all of us are just the random mutation of matter and time and chance. That's all you are. Matter that evolved over time and chance. Mutation. That's what a mutation is. It's chance. And so they're saying to us, you came from basically space sludge, and then billions of years later, here you are with a brain that can think and reason, eyes that can see in 3D and color, like all of these things that we have. And they say it was just an accident. No, you're not an accident. There's nothing in this world or in this universe that is an accident. God tells us so plainly in Scripture how he did all these things and why he did them. And yet, they just refuse to love the truth. They refuse to receive the truth. And so in 2 Timothy 4, verse 3, Paul talks about this further, and he says, this is what is happening when it comes to the end times. He says, for a time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. Can I tell you right now, evolution, it's a fable. It is. You know why? Because there's nothing that anyone could ever do to prove it. It's still called the theory of evolution. That means it's unproven. Why? Because it can't be proven. But the reason people still subscribe to this is just because they don't want God. It's not about the facts. Don't ever let someone tell you that they're an atheist because the facts have proven that there is no God. That's not true. In fact, the opposite is true. If you read through the scriptures and simply see all the stories that God has told us and see that you can go and look at all these things today, I think that's enough proof by itself to show us that there is a God and that he wrote all these things down for our benefit. The fact that there are 3,000-ish known prophecies in Scripture and 2,000 of them have already been fulfilled, I think is enough evidence for us to say there's a God. For those of you who don't know, a prophecy is when God spoke from like here and prophesied the future. He foretold the future before it happened. There's so many, just like there's 300 and something just around Jesus's life, his birth, his death, his resurrection, all those things. There's like 300 and something of them. Fascinating. Spoken 600, 700, 800 years, even 1,500 years before Jesus was born as a man. Isn't that incredible? You're telling me there's not facts to prove this? Like if there was just one or two prophecies, I would say, okay, that could be coincidence. But 2,000 already fulfilled? That's beyond coincidence. You can't say that's coincidence. It's more coincidental, the things that they believe are facts in evolution. More coincidence. And that's why I believe that people that subscribe to that way of thinking have even greater faith than I do as a Christian. Because they're subscribing to something that cannot be proven and will not be proven. And they manufacture so much stuff to put it together to make it seem like it's true. Even the dinosaurs. You know, like when you're reading a science book and they're showing dinosaurs in there and like this whole view of like these big long trunks and huge tails and everything and giant horns. You know that 90 to 95% of that's made up. Because you can look in a science book and it'll show you what they believe it was, what kind of animal it looked like. But then a lot of times in red, it'll show you what bones they found. And it'll be like a leg bone and an arm bone. And then they manufacture the rest of this whole animal from a leg bone and an arm bone. And you're like, wait, you found two bones and you made a whole animal out of that? What? That makes no sense whatsoever. And yet that's what they do. Now I understand that they have found full fossils of full animals. Absolutely, I'm for that, okay? I get it, okay? Job tells us about two huge creatures in his time, Leviathan and Behemoth. If you read Job, Job is supposedly one of the earliest books written in the Bible. And it talks about those two animals. And if you read about those animals, it's actually incredible because Job talks about one that had scales and a long tail. And so, yeah, the ones that they've actually found, they're real. But so much of it is falsified. So much of it is just a fairy tale that they've put together in order to make people believe that it's true. And yet it's just not. But how many people go after those things? How many people believe those things when it's not based on anything? And so it's so easy to see that when God said, in refusing to love the truth, he would give people over to the lie so that they couldn't even believe the truth anymore. There would be no truth left in them. It would only be the lie. And so we see in our time, in these last days, that people are going further and further and further into those lies and further and further and further away from the truth.